right, Boker Tov, everyone. Thank you for joining me again for another Mitok Midvash, sweeter than honey, mystical insights into the Pesach Seder. Yesterday we talked about preparing for Pesach in terms of our inner preparation, the idea of making sure we're going to be properly with our minds focused upward. It's not just about making things happen in the Seder, but it's really about what the Seder's making happen in us. And so today, long been awaited, we're going to begin with what's called the Simanei HaSeder, the order of the Seder. Oh, I just lost my page on the book, excuse me. There we go. All right, the order of the Seder. So we all know that there are, maybe we don't know, 15 or 16 parts of the Seder, depending on whether you consider motzi matzah a single thing. Whether you consider shulchan or no, it's 15 parts. I was right the first time. I should trust myself. The way it's written out here, it has 16 words, shulchan orech being 2 words, the set table. But really, it's 15 parts to the Seder. 15 is the Gematria of the letters. Yud is 10 and Hey is 5. Those are the first 2 letters of Hashem's name. And when we think about Hashem's name in terms of the letters, mystically speaking, the Yud and the Hey represent the mind in terms of the our wisdom and our understanding, the idea being more of the intuitive faculties, the imaginative faculties, the psychic faculties, if you will. And on the other hand, we have the intellectual faculties, the academics, the ability to reason and logic through things, right? One is much more inner knowledge, the other is more of an external knowledge. And so that Yud and that Hey represent what we call the Kudsha B'richu, the Holy One, blessed be He. Right? When we talk about Hashem, transcendent, we also reference that as the Yud and the Hey, that name represents something transcendent from this world, that we never have the ability to truly engage with. You know, on a lower level, we can understand it as I just described, but on the highest levels, it represents levels of godliness which we truly don't have access to in our day-to-day lives. However, then we have the second 2 letters of Hashem's name, the Vav and the Hey, and those are representative of what we call the Shechina, Shechinte, the indwelling presence of God. Those are the levels through which we can perceive some of those higher levels. Now, this is all going to be important as we move forward in today's lesson. We have 15 parts of the Seder, ultimately connecting us to that 15, that Yud and Hey, that is the transcendent levels of godliness. There's something about the Pesach Seder which helps us transcend the world and our day-to-day experience. Because really, as we've said, the Pesach Seder is about reconnecting to the idea that Hashem does miracles, and Hashem did miracles to take us out of Egypt and to make us the free people that we are today. And the Pesach Seder is not just a telling of a story that happened in the past. Part of the mitzvah is chayav kol adam lirot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yotzeh mitzrayim. Every person at the Pesach Seder needs to recognize themselves as leaving Egypt, not as though maybe once back in the day I left Egypt, or on some like deeper level, maybe in a past life I left Egypt. No. Today we are leaving Egypt. We have to recognize that and see that, and ultimately we have to recognize and see that even in our lives today, it may not be as tangible as the complete abrogation of the laws of nature as happened in Mitzrayim. But really, we have to understand that there are miracles happening to each one of us today to ensure that we ultimately can live the life of freedom that we are celebrating on Pesach. Now, it's a very important thing, as we've talked before, when it comes to the Haggadah, that everything needs to be spoken out loud. I think it was yesterday where we said the things that come out of our mouths, those are the things that enter our hearts. And so when it comes to the simanim, the orders of the Seder, we need to speak them out loud. And that's why we have the songs that everyone sings at the beginning of the Seder, whether you sing the traditional tune, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magir, Rachatza, Motzi, Matzah, Maror, Korech, Shulchan, Orech, Safun, Barech, Alel, Niltzah. Now, it sounds like a cute song, just a nice way to go through what the order of the Seder is going to be. But when we're saying that, we're not just going through the order of the Seder. What we're actually doing is we're actually internalizing the idea that there is an order to life. It's so easy to look at our lives and say it's haphazard, especially the last couple of years where we've, to date ourselves, we're in April 2022, hopefully towards the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it seems like the last couple of years has been completely haphazard. Rules are coming up and changing, and everything is different from day to day. And we really didn't know how to conceive of the next step. What would be next? It seemed like there was no rhyme or reason. There was no order to the way of things. The order of the Seder here is trying to impart the deep levels of understanding that we have to know that everything that happens in life is in order. Hakol beseder. Everything is in order, not just in the Seder, but in our lives. Everything is in order. So I think the etymology, there's a great English word called copacetic, right? Which means everything's okay. How's it going? Copacetic, all good. I like to think that the etymology of that was kol beseder. Everything's in order. And that's really how it is. Why? Because again, on the Pesach Seder, we're connecting to Hashem. The whole point is to recognize the godliness in every aspect of our lives. And Hashem is the one who ordered the world. Even the disorder that we experience in the world is in proper order and balance, according to the way Hashem sees the world. And that goes so much to the point that even the exile in Egypt, even our time in Egypt as slaves, was set up and ordered by Hashem. Right? We actually know that explicitly in the Chumash, when Hashem makes his covenant, his eternal covenant with Avraham Avinu, that Avraham will be the father of many nations, Avraham being Av Hamon Goyim, the father of many nations. He says, how will you know this? Because your offspring will be enslaved in a land not their own. Right? They'll be strangers in a land not their own, and it'll be a terrible time. But after that, they'll come out with great rechush, with great inheritance. Right? The inheritance is really the relationship with God. Sure, we left Egypt and we actually had a lot of wealth when we left Egypt, because the Egyptians gave us their wealth. As they sent us away, they said, get out of here eventually. And when they sent us away, they said, even take all of our stuff, just go, leave us alone. We don't want anything to do with you Israelites anymore. Your God is destroying us. And so they sent us out. But we know that the idea that there would be some kind of galut and some kind of exile and some kind of enslavement was bound to happen. And that was as it was supposed to be. And when we came out of it, that was exactly on time, exactly as it was supposed to be. And we have to know from this order of the Seder that the same is true in our lives, that whatever challenges we may face, whether they're personal, whether they're collective or social, even global challenges like we've been experiencing, even challenges that we maybe aren't affected by personally and presently, but we recognize them as challenges. And I'm thinking about the war in Ukraine right now, that ultimately we have to recognize there is some semblance of order to all of these things and why they are happening. And true freedom is to really understand that, to know that even if right now it feels like slavery, I have to recognize that this slavery is only to set me up for a freedom, and that there will be a great wealth of inheritance that will come out of this slavery, that I will come out of that we will come out of these challenging places that we're in, and we'll be much better for them. And so we have to recognize that, again, why did we require the Egyptian slavery? Well, on the one hand, for us to recognize ourselves as a nation. On the other hand, for us to recognize God in the world. Remember, the story that we are telling is that Hashem did miracles magical things happened that were totally against the laws of nature. And in that way, we were able to recognize that Hashem transcends nature. Again, the Yud Hey, Hashem's name as it transcends nature. And really, that's what the ordering of the Seder does. Now, there are two kinds of awakening, it's called, right? People talk about Christianity. People will say they're a born-again Christian, right? I had some kind of revelation, and now I know, I recognize God in my life. Well, we have the same kind of idea, but we call it an awakening. The Aramaic word is itoruta, right, which means to awaken. Hit orer is the word to wake up in the morning, and so itaruta means an awakening. And according to Jewish mysticism, Jewish mystical thought, there are two kinds of awakening. One is itaruta de la ela, an awakening from above, and the other is itaruta de la tata, an awakening from below. Right, one level, the above, is saying Hashem does it all, and from below is saying I desire to get close to God. Right, so regardless of what Hashem does, it's not about miracles. It's not, right. It's about truly recognizing that this is where I want to be. That I want to be in this freedom. I want to be in this relationship. That's that lower awakening. The night of Pesach is considered this itaruta de la ela. It's an awakening from above. Again, God did miracles. It transcends nature. This whole awakening is something that it's not something that we could have done for ourselves. We were slaves, as we discussed a couple of days ago. We were slaves on the 49th level of impurity, as low as we can go and still be able to come out of it. The only way to be awakened from that place was for Hashem to do it for us and to wake us up from above. And it's in that way that we can now look at some of the different layers of the Seder. Now, I'm going to again express that I'm putting this shiur together. I'm putting these together using a particular Haggadah with the Mitok Midvash commentary, the sweeter than honey commentary. And so there are things in that commentary that I write down and that I take notes on and that I learn to both impart here, but also to make sure that I have them in my own Seder. But there are other things that he doesn't say. And if he doesn't say it, I don't necessarily know it. So when he goes to this ordering of the Seder, he doesn't actually go through the whole thing. He says, when it comes to Kadesh, when we make Kiddush on the night of the Seder, we are imbuing our own hearts from above. So really, God is imbuing into our hearts Kedusha, holiness, uniqueness, sanctity. I don't know, however you want to translate Kedusha. Hashem is giving us that deep sense of being different from the world, being set apart from the world, because Hashem did these miracles for us to give us this individualized idea. Then he goes on, he says, Urchatz, which is washing our hands without a blessing, the second part. And he says that represents tahara, purity. And then he makes a point to say, but we have to know something. In our regular lives, there are many types of people who talk about attaining Kedusha, how to become a holy person. And one of the prerequisites for holiness is tahara. We need to be pure people. We need to live a pure life before we can attain Kedusha. Tahara has to come first, Kedusha comes second. So the question therein lies, how could it be that on the night of the Seder, we start with the holiness, with the Kedusha, and after that, we get to the Tahara? And he says it has to do with the Itoruta de la Ela and Itoruta de la Tata, the awakening from above versus the awakening from below. Imagine it like a ladder, and each rung is another level. If we're coming from the bottom, we go from level to level to level, and then we get to the level of tahara, of purity, and then we get to the level of kedusha, of holiness. That's from the bottom up. But what about when it's coming down from the top? Coming down, it's the same ladder, but it starts with kedusha, and then it comes down to tahara. We're drawing down these forces, we're drawing down these energies, we're drawing down these levels of relationship with Hashem into our own hearts as we go through the Seder, because again, it's an itaruta de la. Hashem is doing it for us. Hashem is the one who takes us out of Mitzrayim. Right? It's part of the Agadah. Lo al yedei malach, lo al yedei saraf, lo al yedei hashaliach. Right? Not by an angel, not by a saraf, not by a burning angel or dragon angel. I don't know. Not by a messenger, but it was Hashem who took us out. Sure, Moshe Rabbeinu was there to manifest these things, the expression of godliness in the world to take us out. But it wasn't Moshe who did it. Moshe will be the first person to tell you it wasn't him who did it. He didn't even want to do it. Right? It was Hashem who did it, and Hashem who acted through Moshe and pushed Moshe. It was all God. And on the night of the Seder, we don't talk about Moshe. We talk only about Hashem, because we have to recognize it is Hashem who takes us out. It's coming from above. And he says, so we start with the Kedusha, and we come down to the Tahara. Then we get to Karpas, the vegetable, where he says that represents Anava. Why Anava? Anava is humility. A vegetable grows out of the ground, but many vegetables are actually roots. They grow in the ground, right? They don't have a real expression in the world. They're something that it's not about my external expression or who I am outwardly. It's about internally making sure that there is humility and keeping ourselves grounded, if you will. Then he goes to Yachatz. Yachatz is when we break that middle matzah for the purpose of the afikoman, set some aside to make sure we have it for dessert, to make sure we have a little bit of matzah left over for the end of the meal. And then the second part is going to be for hamotzi, the second part of hamotzi, and we'll get to that in a second. He says Yachatz is from the word chatzi or mechza, which means half. And he says that, if you remember, I think it was yesterday, we talked about the tzibur, the whole kihila being part of this together. Tzaddik, Benoni, Rasha, the righteous, the perfectly righteous, the perfectly evil, and in the middle we have the Benoni, that place where we all are somewhere in the middle. He says Yachatz is about reminding us that it's important to be in the middle. Don't try to be so holy at your Pesach Seder. Don't try to be like, oh, let me read you all of these deep, amazing commentaries and just take over and say everything over everybody's head, because that'll show them. First off, that's not anava. Second off, that you're not doing yourself any favors by putting yourself on that level. Hashem takes us out. It's not about us. It's not about our self-aggrandizement. It's about remembering our place, and that ultimately Hashem is the one who drives the world, and that we are in the middle. We're doing our best, and we should try our best to on certain levels go above and beyond, and on other levels we're supposed to simplify. Remember, the purpose of the Pesach Seder isn't to read lofty commentaries and have exalted discussions. It's to teach our children, to tell the next generation about the miracles that happened to us when we were in Egypt. And that's how we get to the next part, which is Magid. Right? This is the whole telling of the story. And he says, La Hagid ulekavot, which means we not only tell the story, but we have intention with the story. We decide how we want to direct our story. So there are many things that can happen. People will use that Magid section of the Pesach story, and they will relate it to the environment. They'll relate it to peace in the home. They'll relate it to personal growth. They'll relate it to the building community. They'll relate it to medicine. They'll relate it to war. They'll relate it to freedom, to different components of freedom, to challenges that we're facing in our lives day to day. Right? We get to have intention of how we want to direct this story, to make sure that we know that today we are slaves, and that tonight, on the night of the Seder, Hashem takes us out of that slavery, and we get to choose what the slaveries we want to focus on are, and we get to choose how we can move past them and beyond them through the telling of the story. And then he says, and then we get to Rachatza, which is washing our hands before Hamotzi. This is the time where we wash our hands with a bracha. And he says, and now we are purifying ourselves in front of God. It's not just that I'm purifying myself because I have to be pure on the levels of holiness, but now I really need to say, Hashem, I want to stand before you. This is the part, the rachatza, that kind of differentiates between the upper parts, the higher parts of the Seder, and the more grounded lower parts of the Seder, right? Where we're talking about the storytelling, right? That chokhmah and bina, that psychic, intuitive, imaginative faculty, and the understanding, rational faculties, right? Those are all in our heads. And then we have to get to this point where at Rachza, we wash our hands to eat motzi, and then we start eating. And then we're actually getting into the physical relationship with the Pesach Seder. That's actually where he stops. Because as I said, we're trying to recognize the more mystical components here. It's much easier to understand, oh yeah, motzi, matzah, okay, we have to make motzi when we eat, thank Hashem for the food that we have to eat, right? We have to eat it, and then, okay, we understand the maror, the bitter herbs, and we talked about that during the Magi, that it's because of the bitterness, and we talked about the sandwich, which is, right, with also some bitterness, and then the matzah, to eat it together, Zechel or Korban Pesach, and we talked about the Korban Pesach also during the Magid section, right, and so on and so forth. We understand the idea of singing and blessing and all that, and praising, lots of good stuff. But all of that we can understand because there's something much more grounded and rational to it. Those first parts, those are the things that truly help us be elevated, and those are truly the things that help us draw holiness down from Hashem into our own lives. And it's when we do that that we truly merit the fact that Hashem Ya'azov, that just as we are sanctifying ourselves to come before God, so we recognize that Hashem is coming into our lives to help us and to free us from whatever mitzrayim we may be facing. That's all for today. Tomorrow, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will talk about the Ke'arat HaSeder, the Seder plate, and the 3 matzot. Until then, have a wonderful day. Chag Pesach Sameach. I hope your preparations are going smoothly and easily, and that you're keeping it all on the level. If you are going a little overboard, if you feel stressed about it, you're not supposed to. It's supposed to be part of the Chag. You're not supposed to enslave yourself with the celebration of the Chag, though too many of us really do. And so let's all appreciate the freedom that the Chag has to offer. If you have any questions about how to make that preparation a little easier, feel free to reach out to me. Also, again, you can check out the Beth Emet on my personal YouTube channel to find a previous shiur I did where I talked about how to prepare your whole house in a couple of hours or less. That's all for today. I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Shalom.